Welcome to Net Impact, the podcast that demystifies and explores the influence of cybersecurity and cybercrime across the world and into our lives. Brought to you by ThriveDX, the global leader in cybersecurity training. Here's your host and guide to the digital world, Fred Menachem.
Welcome back to Net Impact. As usual, I'm your host, Fred Menachem. It is great to be here, and I happen to be particularly excited today because I'm bringing somebody that I've known for quite some time, an old friend, Malcolm Harkins. I'm so excited to welcome him. So you all know, if anybody who's listening to this doesn't know, he's one of the most respected voices in cybersecurity. And I actually first met Malcolm while I was heading global booking for the I-24 News Network, and he was often a guest, and his insightful guest appearances always left not only a lasting impression on me, but on viewers in the industry, really at a time when cybersecurity wasn't really at the forefront yet. But Malcolm was always ahead of his time in many ways. So in his over 3 decades of experience, he's held pivotal roles at Intel and Cylance. He's testified before Congress. He's authored influential books, and he's earned numerous industry awards. And currently, he's now the Chief Security and Trust Officer at HiddenLayer, helping secure AI systems at the highest level. So for those of you folks who don't know about HiddenLayer and what he does there, so at HiddenLayer, Malcolm leads efforts to revolutionize AI security with comprehensive user-friendly solutions, and they're backed by companies you probably heard of, top investors like Microsoft's venture fund and IBM Ventures. And his leadership ensures organizations can leverage AI safely without risking breaches, which is pretty important. So I've always personally admired Malcolm's ability to push innovation while staying committed to ethical cybersecurity practices, which we're going to talk more about later. And I'm also excited to dive into his journey and the work he's doing at HiddenLayer, but I'm even more excited to talk about his whole life story, which really is something I'm really excited to do. So Malcolm, you ready for this? Without further ado, man, I just want to welcome you to the show. How you doing, my brother?
I'm doing great, Fred, and it's great to chat again, and I'm excited to have this dialogue and see where we go and the journey we create through our discussion.
All right, so what I want to start talking about, I'm just going to get into it, but we're not going to talk yet about cyber per se. You had, like all of us, we all have a story, right? And our stories are filled with adversity, with pain, with happiness, all of us. That's life. But I know that, look, you have a story, of course, of overcoming adversity and in high stress fields, but I want to talk a little bit, and I know we've talked about this over the years, but about your upbringing. I mean, because it really plays into, and this is from you, into how you lead, right? And how you've managed to work in the industry and who you are. So tell us whatever you want to tell us about that.
Yeah, you're right. We all have our struggles, and some people have different life journeys than others. I grew up in a low middle income neighborhood in Southern California. Had a dad who had a 5th grade education, did manual labor, had been retired from the Navy, had drug dealers next door, drug addicts across the street, a father who was, let's say, not very kind at times. Grade school, you have, gangs in and around and stuff like that. So there's a little bit of a rough upbringing, not only the broader environment, but frankly, even at home with the police at our house every once in a while, with my dad, who was, again, not a kind, gentle person at times.
You had siblings?
Yeah, I had an older brother, 14 months older. So just the two of us at home with my mom, and my dad luckily worked nights and weekends, so we didn't see him that much, because by the time we get home from school, he'd be heading to work, which was generally a good thing, considering his temper at times.
That sounds like life can give us such throw such difficult things at us, but look like how you turned out. You turned out pretty well. But I mean, I'm giving you a little bit of an accolade there, right?
I wouldn't wish it on anybody, and I certainly wouldn't want to go through it again, but it is a part of who I am. It is a part of how I've evolved to what I do and stuff like that. The struggle that I've had to do is, how do I not end up like my dad? How do I make sure that how I was socialized and the behaviors I was around don't manifest themselves in me for my kids or my family? But beyond that, it does create a level of Teflon skin for certain things.
And you certainly have it. I've gotten to know you over time, right? You definitely do, and that's an important. So moving on to how you got into cybersecurity. We've had several CISOs on the show, but I think you're actually the first security and trust officer that we've ever had. So you're like, well, that's pretty exciting, man. So I was, for folks that have no concept of what I am talking about, explain to the audience what is the job title and what did you actually do?
So, to me, security and trust are inextricably linked. Trust is a function of two things: competence and character. And when you think of security, and you look at the industry, and I've told folks this for years, that by and large, you shouldn't necessarily trust the security industry. Why?
Right.
Because it profits from the insecurity of computing, one. And then two, let's look at, in some cases, technologies that we've had around for a long time that have been marketed, ended up in getting awards or other things like that. But you look at it and you go, okay, let's look at the competencies. Well, we've bought technology that has failed us in many cases. Right? Sometimes it's maybe we didn't deploy it right, maybe we didn't deploy it early enough. But internally, you got to look at it and you go, look at all the risk curves that are growing, and you go, okay, well, do we demonstrate the competencies to best manage the risk? And in some cases, that's questionable. And then you got to go character and intent. Well, the intent of the security industry, by and large, is to defend, but I've seen and witnessed some security companies, it's changed over the years, but they've perpetuated dated architectures, dated technologies. Why? Because it's their cash cow,
Right.
right? And then, you look at organizations who are meant to manage security operationally, and you look at what the SEC's had to do with mandating disclosures. Well, guess what? They did that because public companies weren't properly disclosing to their investors. Why? Again, they could play in the gray space until it was absolutely crystal clear. I didn't. It's public information. I published articles on this back a while ago. Intel in 2010 disclosed a cyber incident, the first public company ever disclosed a cyber incident in its financial filings. Why? Because Sarbanes-Oxley. And if you looked at the laws before all the clarifications and before the SEC provided no, wiggle room, so to speak, we came to the conclusion that an event was potentially material, and for that reason, we should disclose it in our financial filings, right? So, so you look at all this stuff, and to me, it's just you've really got to peel the onion of how you're managing risk, to what extent you're managing it, and making sure you're doing the proper disclosures to your shareholders internally, and not, let's say, discoloring the portrait of risk, which I've had discussions with peers. I've done surveys on this and found that upwards 75, 76% of security leaders have either been asked to or actually watered down the portrait of risk before it elevated further, right? And I don't color the lines differently than what the data and facts tell me.
Which is, by the way, so important. It's funny you bring up Sarbanes-Oxley. I don't think I've heard that. I don't think anybody probably listening to this has any idea what we're talking about, unless they're of, after 5 decades, they might brings back memories. But all joking aside, and I wasn't going to get into this, but I do want to for a moment since you brought it up. We're seeing now, you were ahead of the curve, right? Because there has to be, look what's happening now with cyber. I mean, this is the Wild West in a sense, not for you, but for most people, in many ways for all of us, AI, cyber. So, we saw what happened with the SEC and SolarWinds, and you're saying corporations stay in the gray until, right, they have to do it. But at Intel, you went ahead and did it ahead of time. It was like being proactive. I mean, that's what you were saying to me. So
Well,
the question,
I believe we already had the obligation under
yeah,
existing
well,
Sarbanes-Oxley law. And then when I came to that conclusion, while the investigation was still, there was like 15 people in the company who knew what was going on,
right,
including the CEO and a few lawyers and mostly people in my team. But, I woke up one night after, a couple of weeks of 12, 15, 16-hour days, and I'm like, oh boy, I think this might be a material or significant event under Sarbanes-Oxley. I went and talked to the general counsel. The general counsel said, you might be right. Go talk to the head of SEC legal. I read him in on what we had learned, where we're at, all the suppositions of things and facts and, things that we're trying to validate. And he's like, yeah, you may be right. Then we went and got outside counsel. And outside counsel then, while we were doing the technical investigation, started evaluating what our reporting obligations would be under certain circumstances. And we just kept them up to date on the technical investigation. They came to the conclusion, yes, it makes sense for Intel to disclose this in its financial filings as a risk in its risk statements. So that's what we did.
And what year was that, by the way?
That was in 2010, February of 2010.
Well, and just in maybe a minute or so, we're seeing now, and for folks, I guess not everybody, like everybody's involved with knowing all of this stuff, but basically, the SEC had put out some specific, I don't know what you would
They put
call
out
them,
regulations that said if you have a cyber incident and it's
Right.
material, it follows the same materiality rules as any other type of incident or event. And you need to properly put stuff in your 10K, which are systemic risk issues, or an 8K, which is a filing that you do
Yep.
within 4 days of determining you had an event that was material.
Where do you draw the line, Malcolm? Because look, this is complex. This is new. We're pioneers. Let's be realistic. I mean,
It's to me, materiality is not so complex, but I'm also a former finance person, right?
okay, fair enough. No, good. So give that to me. Give that to me before we move to the next thing. Give me your. You said it's not complex, so go ahead. I want to hear. I'm very interested to know your thoughts.
You got materiality by nature, materiality by impact. Any
Yep.
public company and any CISO who didn't understand what could cause a material event for their company, if they're all of a sudden going, boy, this is a hard thing and we don't know it, I'm like, what the hell have you been doing? My job, day one, running security aspects in late 2001, design goal was no material or significant event, which meant, guess what? I had to understand what could create a material or significant event. Why? Because that's what Andy Grove, as the head of Intel and Intel shareholders and board, wanted. They don't want material impact that could affect the company, its operations, or its shareholders, or its customers.
Yep.
Well, so I go, if materiality was a problem for you, what type of risk were you trying to manage? And somebody goes, cyber risk. And I'm like, okay, to what extent?
I mean, risk is risk at the end of the day, right? Cyber risk. No, I see what you're saying. I mean, risk is risk, right? It doesn't matter what it is.
If a factory's offline because of an earthquake,
right,
or a ransomware event, who cares?
Right.
Cause is different, but it's a material impact because the factory's offline, right?
100%. Interesting. Well, I have to say that this is a conversation that we should continue. Really, we could have an entire, and even a roundtable at some point on this, because I really think that, Malcolm, is something that actually just came to me while I was sitting here. We should do a roundtable just on this subject. This is something that is obviously out there that we're just talking about. We see what happened with SolarWinds. I know a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. Why don't we do that, man? What do you think? Put something like that together. Yeah, we're going to do it. Okay. On that note, so we can move on to some other other things. So you went from a kid we talked about to cybersecurity. Give me like the quick bullet points. How did you end up there at a time when it wasn't really a thing?
Yeah, well, so when I got out of graduate school, I did my MBA in finance accounting. I landed at Intel in a computing finance business unit. So I had negotiated corporate agreements for Intel's design environment. 10, 15, 20, largest contract I ever negotiated was $100 million design equipment purchase agreement. So I was a finance guy, procurement guy, business operations, did a bunch of things. I was profit loss manager for Intel's flash product group for a number of years, helped actually create an online services business at Intel Online Services.
Oh, yeah?
We actually hosted a big, large search engine company when it launched. We were building and trying to build the equivalent of AWS and Azure back in the late 90s, and I had helped write the business plan for it and stuff. Then .com bust happens, that business gets wobbly. 9/11 happened, and Code Red and NIMDA. So you had a physical event and then two logical events, all in that summer, fall of 2001. Intel CIO Doug Bush called me up. I had known him from my time in IT finance and stuff like that. And it's like, Malcolm, I need you to run security and business continuity for me. And I'm like, why? I don't know shit about security. He's like, yeah, but I got a bunch of security geeks who don't know shit about the business. They'll teach you and you'll teach them. And that's how I landed in security. And he's like, and you have thick skin. You've gone toe to toe with Grove before. Can withstand his poking, prodding, pounding. And so he wanted somebody with Teflon skin. But
Yeah.
again, I did that and brought my business acumen, my project and program management skills, all with focused on delivering outcomes, delivering results, not just saying I'm managing risk. Again, a design goal of no material significant event. Everything we did was to manage and minimize that potential. You can't eliminate risk, but if I know what could cause an extinction level an event, so you could take a physical analogy. What's the equivalent of a stroke, heart attack, cancer, stuff like that that can cause a level of lethality, an extinction level event. Manage those things, then manage the next level of things. Then you got operational risk, the equivalent of a sprained ankle or, broken arm. Those things you don't want.
Mitigate it.
Yeah, you don't want to have happen, but they're not going to kill you, right?
Right. And they're gonna happen. I mean, let's
And
be
they're going to
realistic.
happen.
Everything.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we don't want anything to happen to anybody, but even in cyber, we know. Look, everybody's gonna be hacked. I'm sorry, I hate to say it. I mean, it's.
Well,
Maybe you're gonna
you can't
disagree with. I
eliminate
mean, I
you
mean,
can't eliminate risk physically, logically, and the
right.
financial, right?
But you can
So
mitigate
my
it.
job was to really understand all that stuff, and then over time, from late 2001 till I left in 2015 to go join Silence, I ended up putting my arms around every aspect of information risk, security, controls, and compliance at Intel. So all the traditional InfoSec stuff, the CISO, product security, so all the security development lifecycle, privacy by design for Intel's products and services. I oversaw corporate emergency management, which meant all the business continuity, disaster recovery worldwide for the company. I had Sarbanes-Oxley, I had HIPAA, I had PCI,
Oh my God.
anything that created a
Yeah.
risk and compliance issue, I put my arms around. And then I also sat on the Corporate Ethics and Compliance Oversight Committee. And I also spent time with the Corporate Social Responsibility team, because to me, all of those things were intertwined, related risks
Yeah.
and principles and behaviors that needed to be stitched together.
It's amazing. I mean, those were such early years. I mean, you really there weren't many people doing. I mean, you kind of just learned without any kind of official in any official capacity. I mean, kind of. I
Yeah,
mean, you're just
I learned the technology
right.
and the security stuff from the security team, who had the patience and frankly would, go, Malcolm, get your head out of your ass.
Yeah.
And they had the license. Keep me from doing something stupid and making a dumb decision if I don't understand it. Grind on me, pull me aside, beat the crap out of me until I get it. At the same time, I would sometimes say, yes, I understand that. Thank you very much. But here's the decision. Sometimes I was wrong, but sometimes I was right. But again, it just became, how did they, in essence, waterboard me with security acumen? And how did I take my business acumen and put those two things together to manage the risk dynamics? And then, from there to Silence, where I just basically did a mini version of what I did at Intel, because Silence was, early to mid-stage startup when I joined in 2015. And so I managed all that stuff internally, spent most of my time as well with the sales and marketing team, again, helping people try and think differently about our approaches to security, because sometimes I think our approaches to security are a good chunk of the problems that we have. And then, since then, I've been dabbling with other security companies. And as you mentioned, I'm now with HiddenLayer as its chief security and trust officer. So I'm managing and helping shape with our CIO and CTO our internal security and controls and compliance activities. And again, trying to get people to understand why they need to think about AI security and how existing security controls do not work. They do not protect your AI models. They
Right.
provide indirect protection at best, but they don't protect the AI models themselves.
So I love this risk conversation, but I am going to move. I wish we had all day, of course, but I am going to move to something we started talking about. And then I want to get a little bit more into ethics in cybersecurity, and I also want to get into education because I think that's important. And there are some other things I want to talk about. We'll see how much time we have. But we talked a little bit earlier about adversity, right? And all of these things, and dysfunction, whatever you want to call it. But look, I, none of us can deny, and I know you've been engaged in this, and certainly I've had my own struggles with mental health over the years, and I've learned, I've fought battles, and you don't ever overcome it, but I've managed to deal with it better, and in many ways, it's helped me and hurt me, et cetera, as we all know. But I want to kind of talk with you about, you've been very engaged in this stuff, as it relates to mental health and wellness in the cybersecurity industry. And from what I've seen, look, a lot of people are afraid to talk about it. We know these are very high stakes jobs in my world, in politics, media, same scenario. What, I'm not going to even ask you a question. Talk about it, man. I know you have a lot to say about this subject.
It's definitely a challenge, right? There's aspects of the security roles, because I think a lot of people who are in the security industry have a high protection instinct, right? They, like police officers, firemen, folks in the military, they want to, do good, and protect the environment, customers, and stuff like that. That can sometimes take a mental toll. How do I stop the protection activities so that I can go to my kid's ball game? How do I deal with an incident while my wife is giving birth and I get a call? How do I deal with a risk condition where I'm at an opposite perspective from other executives who think it's a low risk issue and I think it's a high risk issue, and you're battling those type of things? There can be a lot of stress from those frictions, and sometimes they have spillover effects. Unfortunately, there was times even, and you might go, boy, this was before cyber blew up, but you go back, Intel circa 2007, Intel, had some challenges. It was going through some layoffs, kind of like it is right now. And, I'm making management decisions of moving people out of management. And luckily, we didn't have to lay off any people in my team, but we had to flatten some things. At the time, we were having high incident load and risk issues and internal battles over risk things. And I had one employee die of a heart attack, one employee die of a stroke, another employee that had some drug and alcohol problems that also ended up, unfortunately, in a different situation. But I've seen it, and I've had to be the leader who managed that while I was also going through my father's own decline and eventual death, with all the same stress of I've got to manage everybody else's stress. So it can create a level of compression on you. And I think the only way to deal with it is to be transparent on it and go seek help from mental health experts. Share internally, like when I've had problems at home with kids, parents aging and stuff like that, and you've got that stress while you got the work stress. I would tell people, look, give me a level of slack. I'm emotionally compromised because of stuff going at home. So if I'm short, I'm an asshole, whatever, whack me upside the head. I'll hopefully apologize, but give me a level of patience. And correspondingly, guess what? When you do that and you're that transparent and vulnerable, when other people have stressors, they also will then also correspondingly give you a heads up, right?
I could not agree with you more. And as I said earlier, look, there is obviously, and it's hard to believe we're in what, God, I don't even want to say it because it means I'm getting older. We're in 2024. Now, there is still, and I hear people talking about it more. I'm not sure if they're really talking about it because they feel like they're supposed to, or because they really believe this, but there's still a stigma around mental health. There's still a stigma around addiction with all the stuff that we know, right? You're talking about it, with employees. And I know, as I said earlier, for me, I don't try. There's been people in my life, and I've always talked about this. It seems like my freaking theme in all these cybersecurity episodes. We're talking mental health, but you know what? It all interrelates. And obviously in cyber, like every industry, and not enough people are talking about it. So we need to keep talking about this.
Well,
And
the other thing that becomes hard is if you're dealing with a sensitive risk issue and you're struggling trying to manage it as well as manage the perspectives that others have, who do you go talk to on something that is highly sensitive when you might be at odds with other peers in the organization, like the CIO and CTO, or the CFO, or maybe the CEO? But you've got your data, you've got your facts, and you've got your logics. And there's somehow, like I said, there's a pressure to dilute the portrait of risk that has occurred over years. I've surveyed on it. 76% of us have felt it. I've felt it at times. And so when you're in that
what's the
situation,
solution?
yeah, well, to be honest, it's sometimes you got to go get internal counseling, go to the head of internal audit, go to legal, go to somebody that can be a part of a trusted circle that's not going to create a confidentiality and potential leak issue. So, because the other thing is, I can't go talk to my wife about what's going on. Because as soon as I've done that, I've just leaked sensitive information, right? She knows I'm in an incident. She knows I'm doing this stuff. She knows it's impactful. She knows she can't share when I don't show up to the kids thing that Malcolm's busy with work, right? But you can't talk about it because the sensitivity of it, right? And so those things, like I said, they create a level of compression. And I think you've just got to go find internally with the appropriate professional, psychological folks, where you can go have dialogues. And luckily at Intel and stuff like that, I have my own legal counsel that was specific to cybersecurity and privacy, that we could have dialogues around things to calibrate, and sometimes calibrate me relative to others, other times get their opinions on how to navigate the fact that I'm going to go battle somebody on something that they're more senior, but I have the data and logic to support what needs to get done, and they want to discount it, right? You have to go find where you can have those dialogues in a trusted way. And luckily I've been able to find them and be able to do that, which has helped me manage all of those dynamics and even at work, share what's going on at home and find out that, guess what, other people may have gone through similar things and can offer you insight.
So there's two things that you said that stood out for me. Number one, I couldn't agree more. Just from a human level, forget obviously there's a whole, there is a reason to be that way from a strategic perspective, but I don't do anything personally, just strategically. I'm saying strategically, you want your employees to do well, this and that, but there has to be a level of obviously of empathy, because nobody can fake that kind of thing. And so what I was going to say was, I am all about humans, and I have learned in my life, not learned, I always knew this, that when you're real, truly authentic and genuine, that people are going to, as a byproduct, want to work harder because they're going to be, comfortable. And for me, I always am very open about, even though we talked earlier when I started this question about a stigma, I am very open about it because everybody is dealing with stuff. There is nobody that doesn't. I have been around people in my life, and it doesn't different. I've worked in a lot of different fields that people are the most guarded people, but with me, they open up. And it's because it's so hard to find somebody who truly, right, or people that will really listen. And so when you're working with people, and I want to move on to the second thing I said that stood out, you were talking about, yes, you can't go home to your wife for different reasons. Look, I've been involved with a lot of different types of, you probably know some of them, Malcolm, different worlds and fields, and with a lot of people that in a similar situation, you just can't talk about those things. But internally, everybody's going through the same thing. One, even if you can't talk internally to each other about the specifics, you could talk about the feeling. Everybody knows in that environment, right? What you're dealing with. And so I agree with you. I couldn't agree more. You have to find that circle of trust within, within your work environment. And the thing is, this is that people say, oh, we can't build relationships at work, right? It's just professional. That's bullshit.
Even with peers, peers have used me without disclosing sensitive stuff.
Exactly.
Just saying, I need somebody who has felt this the world is closing in on me and I have too many things, and I need somebody to help me dissect
Right.
myself and dissect how to manage my behaviors and my approach to things differently, because I'm starting to become an ass because of all these things causing the stress, or I'm not sleeping or whatever, right?
We need to be comfortable with the people that we're engaging with on a regular basis. So, on that note, we've talked about a lot of things here, but as far as burnout, I mean, clearly it's a risk in every industry, and cyber is no different, and in some ways even more of a risk. How do you manage burnout? And if I don't even know, I assume you do it well. I mean, on some level, like we all do. But what strategies can you give others? I mean, they're going through that. Well, I can assure you, there's a lot of people that are listening right now or watching that have never had the opportunity and refuse, understandably, and scared to talk about it. So let's spit it out. Who can we help today, Malcolm?
Well, for me,
Uh,
there's a few aspects of the way in which I manage it for myself as well as the organizations that I'm a part of. For myself, I'm a gym rat. I'm up at 3:45 on most mornings, at the gym at 4:15. I have to have that physical workout
right.
in order to manage my own behavioral and emotional idiosyncrasies. And if I don't burn off that energy, I also add a little bit of extra energy at home that my wife would prefer that I burn off. So that way I don't just drive her nuts with a bunch of other things to get done. So for me, physically working out is a key thing. Weekends, we're on the outdoors, we're on the lake, we're hiking, we're snowshoeing, stand up, paddling. So besides working out, those type of things, I love to cook.
Oh yeah. What do you cook?
Hanging, yeah, almost anything. I can cook anything from Thai to Indian to California cuisine to you name it. I just like cooking and I spend time in the kitchen. That's relaxing for me. And then, spending time with friends and socializing, right? That's kind of fun. Yeah, but in a work environment, the thing that I've always found, and I have a trademark on 6 words. I believe, I belong, I matter. I've always tried to create a culture where an employee, including myself, because this was also a level of self-diagnosis for Malcolm as a problem child, was,
Right.
and part of this also probably dates back to even for, my upbringing.
Good.
You go, I think people need to routinely say to themselves, and some people it's daily, some people it's every few months or whatever, I believe in the mission. I believe in the management. I believe in myself. I believe in my peers. I feel like I belong because the organization in its formation frankly demonstrates it gives a crap about me. And the work I do and the work the organization does matters. And I think if you look at that and you can cultivate a culture that is causing people to go, boy, I really believe in this. I feel like I belong and I feel like I matter. They'll be in their ideal state.
Yeah.
And when they're in their ideal state, their ability to absorb stress, absorb challenges, it's better. And when they're not able to absorb it, they'll feel like they don't believe anymore, they don't belong, they don't matter. But guess what? If you've created the right cultural dynamic, somebody sitting next to them, somebody that interacts with them, might not be their manager, might not be their leader, will be able to notice the difference in Malcolm's approach to things, and then help cultivate back the belief, the belonging and the matter to the role and to the organization. And so for me, having people be in their ideal state, and looking at a work environment's just a different form of relationship.
Of
Spouse is a
course.
relationship, but the same thing applies at
Everything's a
home.
relationship.
Yeah,
I
at
always say that to
home,
people. They're trying to, right, exactly.
yeah, at home you want to feel
Yeah.
like you believe in your spouse, you believe in your family, you feel like
Right.
you feel like you matter. It's just the context is different. And
Of course.
and so for me, that's where I go. If you can create a good organizational culture in it, I've labeled it as I believe, I belong, I matter, but if the right organizational construct is there, you'll have a greater resilience from and resistance to the stress, And like I said, I've seen it when I've suffered and really been in poor states. My own teams, the way in which they engaged me caused me to kind of, when I was at odds and not maybe believing in the management, not feeling like I belonged within the construct, and maybe because you were so at odds and told you're wrong, even though you got the data, you didn't feel like what you did mattered.
Right. Oh, God, I know that one.
My
Yeah.
own team provided the sustenance for
Yeah.
me to continue pursuing what needed to be done, right?
Everything in life's a relationship. I always say this to people. They're like, we love, and maybe that's, I don't know, that's how we compartmentalize things. A relationship's a relationship. Doesn't matter what the relationship is. We make things linear, right? The needs are the same in one level or another, the same needs as human beings. So if we understand the way to understand people and to be more successful and engage with people is understanding that they're no different than us. We're all thinking we all want the same things. And that's how I think from a management perspective, it certainly can change the world if people just take the time to
Totally agree with you.
see
Now,
that.
the one thing I learned on relationships a long time, and you might find this funny, but relationships are like raffles. You have to be present to win.
Yeah.
If you're not
Yeah. Oh,
present, you won't win in having good relationships.
love it, man. 100%. And we could talk all day about that, but I want to talk a little bit about education and boards of ethics. But I wanted to tell you, I don't know if you know this, that I happen to know a lot about education personally because I ran the universal campaign for universal free pre-kindergarten in Florida back when
Oh, wow.
Georgia was the only other state doing it, and we did it by referendum. You had to collect signatures, and it was a whole thing. The reason why I bring this up though is because I really learned a lot, and you'll see the connection by the way in a minute. You're gonna be like, "What's he talking about?" I learned a lot about 3 to 4 year olds. Now you have kids,
Yes,
and they're
3 of
older.
them.
They're not 3 and
Yeah,
4 though,
they're
right?
our daughter's 26, our middle
You're right.
son just
Right.
28, and our oldest will be 30 in another month or so.
And you're older than me, man. I love it. I might get in trouble here for saying that. Just not by very much, guys. By the way, it's a little bit of a competition. Sorry, I hope I didn't embarrass you there. I'm just
No, no,
kidding.
no, it's
But
not a problem.
no,
But
sorry.
you mentioned kids. I learned a lot from my wife. She did her PhD in developmental psychology and
Oh,
emotion and
really? Oh,
research
God.
in
Right.
early childhood.
Yeah.
So
Oh, so
while we were both in graduate school, she was focused on emotion and behavior research in early childhood.
Oh, okay. So you'll know exactly. So you remember your kids were 3 to 4. Now, I still don't have kids, 5 nephews and a niece, but I learned so much from a guy named David Lawrence, who's like one of the preeminent, anyway, children's advocates in the country. And that age, do you remember your kids are like sponges, right? They
Yep.
soak everything up. Now, we see with these young kids today, and even your kids, that they grew up in technology, right? They're touching a phone when they're little kids, but
Yep.
you know what they should be doing? And my point is because I'm talking about hygiene, digital hygiene, and training. That's what I'm getting at. Our 3 and 4 year olds should be learning about cybersecurity. And that's what I was going to get at because I know cybersecurity training and it is so important. And we talk about it. I mean, what are your thoughts there? I know I just
No,
kind of threw you for a
you're
loop,
totally right. So
but
I'll give you a really good example, and this is an example from several years ago. A gal who used to babysit our kids when our kids were small, when she had one of her children over, and this is well over a decade ago. Child was maybe 20 some months old, 24 months old, something like that. And they
okay.
had gone to Disneyland. She had sent us some pictures. My wife put it in a frame, like traditional frame, but it didn't have the full frame, so it was more the glass type thing. And the gal came over, and the little girl wanted the picture. And when she got it, guess what she did? She's like, it doesn't work. She's trying to swipe to the
Yeah.
next picture,
Right.
right? As a 2-year-old, and this is like almost a decade ago, when the original iPads, right? And thinking, okay, it's this glass screen. I can scroll through these pictures, right? And that was a decade ago. Imagine it now. I totally agree with you. Not only do they need to be taught more about it, but this is also where, as creators of technology and people who put technology out for use, we need to be cognizant of the vulnerability that children have and the susceptibility they have, because we've already proven we're all susceptible as adults to some of these things. Imagine what we're creating in terms of potential compromise, for our children, particularly, with all the postings and all the, social media and all the videos and all that stuff that people put up, day in and day
Yeah.
out.
I also think, and this is something near to dear to your heart, mine as well, is that they should also be teaching kids about ethics. I mean, every kind of ethics back then, but certainly in the digital world and all that. I mean, that's the age. All the things that are so important to you, and hopefully to many people, but something you've really put your hooks in and probably recognized from a digital perspective before others. Those are things that should be. We say everything we learned in kindergarten, right, and pre-K.
I agree with you. And again, this is the interesting thing with
Yeah,
kind of ethics and stuff like that is we can all have a little bit of slightly different views of it, which is fine. But
sure. I
knowing
mean,
where
yeah,
your ethical and moral compass is and what's acceptable and not acceptable, where you're going to compromise, where you're not going to compromise, but I think is healthy. Now, the other thing that I think is true, not only for risk, but for ethics is, the other challenge that I think in the human condition that we have is people tend to gather data to affirm their point of view rather than gathering data to inform their point of view. And that's also a
yeah,
critical distinction because when you start thinking about even, with the election year and disinformation and misinformation, stuff like that, search engines, if it's always going to feed you stuff that affirms your point of view, you're going to drive, and I think this is what's been occurring over the past 15 years or so, a level of societal polarity. Because Malcolm's only going to continue to get things that cement him towards the view that he already had, which moves him in this direction. And Joey is going to get stuff that moves him in this direction. And I think the consequence sometimes of the fact that we
yeah.
don't question our beliefs, don't question that stuff, is a continued affirmation that kind of calcifies further things. And again, then you create a greater level of polarity, which then makes it, you get all the dynamics that we currently see. Always go, I might be strongly opinionated on something, but check that box for a moment, pause, and then open your mind to go, am I wrong? Is my perspective out of sync with what should be the right approach? And as long as you can separate that stuff, because I'm a very opinionated person, and
Well, Malcolm, hold on. I'm sorry. You're opinionated?
yeah,
What?
it's just slightly.
Oh, I mean,
Um,
I'm not at all.
but I
Uh,
try
uh, uh,
to
uh,
be very clear on those beliefs and the logic behind them and or the data or facts behind them, but then still be open to, if somebody else has data or logic, well, share it. So you get back
Right.
to ethics and cybersecurity. I was the arbiter of risk, and I would not budge on my portrait or colorization of risk. Now, if somebody goes above me and they go, well, Malcolm, this is moderate risk and you think it's
Right.
critical risk, well, why?
For that.
Well, because
Right.
I think so. Well, guess what? I don't give a about what you think. What I care about is what is the data that caused you to come to that conclusion, or what's your logic? And if you have none, get the out of my way. I own the decision.
And again, just really quickly on that, and I want to go to the last thing, but it's crazy the world we live in today, Malcolm. I call it a post-truth world because you're talking about somebody maybe not proving you wrong, making you think differently based on data. But today we live in a world where you could have all the data, and then you know what they say? Oh, but everybody has their own version of the truth. What does that mean? This person has no data. There's facts in front of you. Sorry, I'm getting excited because this makes me crazy. I don't understand it. Like how, right? Am I right? Your narrative is
Well,
not correct. Not because
you're
right.
you're
What
you're
the
well,
heck? Right.
you're
Right.
totally right. As
Right.
a young finance person, one of
Right.
Intel's CIOs, my mouth always goes sometimes before my brain engages. So I'd spout off an opinion on something, and he would pause me and say, Malcolm, do you know that or do you believe
Right.
it?
Right.
If you know it, show your data. If you believe it, share your logic. If you have none, shut up and get out of the room.
Right, exactly, but it doesn't work that way anymore. Anyway, we're going to continue that. Okay, Malcolm, look, thanks for coming, my brother. This has been great. But before we say goodbye, man, I'm giving you like a free freaking, I don't know if I should do that actually. Is that okay? But I'm giving you some freedom here. Say what you want, anything. What do you want to leave the audience with? Cybersecurity, your life, the universe, hidden layer. I don't know what you're doing in 10 minutes from now, what you're cooking tonight. Throw it out there, man.
A couple things. Don't rely on your traditional security controls to protect your AI.
Right.
They won't work. Hit me up if you want to understand why. The other thing, don't cling to a mistake just because you spent a lot of time making it. You have the opportunity to fix it.
Say it one more time.
Don't cling to a mistake just because you spent a lot of time making it. You can fix it.
Wow, man. And what a way to end. Loved it, man. Thank you for joining, my brother.
Thanks, Fred.
Today's podcast is brought to you by ThriveDX, the global leader in cybersecurity training. Now, are you interested in learning more about becoming a cybersecurity professional or how to better secure the future of your organization? Visit thrivedx.com for more details and make sure you follow us on YouTube, LinkedIn, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter, for updates, info, and more. And before we go, I want to thank everyone who helped make this possible. My dynamic executive producer, Michael Seth Prell, our producer and publicist, Carrie Ann Hilton. The design and original music was done by Gilly Fox, Ksenia Aron, and Muro Hanna. Our editors, Modi Nachum and Amit Zach. Our advisor, Yoni Neiman, and our manager, Liora Zeri. And the entire operation was overseen by Eugenio Robino Writer at ThriveDX. Thanks to this incredible team. Thanks everyone for joining us. This is Fred Menachem, 0 to 60 and nothing in between. We'll see you in the next episode.